Test, test, test. Do you hear me now? Do you hear me now? Meow, meow, meow. Can you hear me now? The man says. Can you hear me now? Now, into the chat. I hear you. Okay, Lonnie Tucker, thanks. So let me reset this. Working. Excellent. Sorry about that. Everything was showing up like it was working, but I just had to unplug my audio interface and plug it back in, and that did the trick. So, happy Friday. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. Just to go through my little opening spiel that I did for a minute ago. We're back on our OSR to see what's going on. I have it sorted by hot. So these are the things that have caught the attention of the OSR subreddit community. And the first thing I thought I'd look at was Dungeon Seeds, a guide for making a mega dungeon, a book. I don't know if I'll go to itch. I guess we'll go to itch.io and check it out. It's posted by Working Boy. Let's give it a look. See if it's got a sample. All right, so we got $5. In His Majesty the Worm, characters adventure through a mythic. Again. I bumped the cord, I think. All right. I should be back. I feel like I'm back. Let me get this out of the way so I'm not tempted to hit it again. Okay. So how far did I get into this thing? Yes, it's back. All right. Sorry about that. I guess it's just the week for technical difficulties here. Okay. So this book theoretically will break a mega dungeon down to its atomic constituent parts, populated with interesting things, and connect the levels together. So I guess it's suggesting that you're gonna make a mega dungeon, not by trying to make some massive thing to start, but by creating smaller modular bits and piecing them together. This book contains procedure for laying out interconnected dungeons, as well as inspirational dungeon seeds as prompts. And I guess His Majesty the Worm that he's referencing, I've heard the name, but I haven't used it, so I'm not sure. So this might be the person. All right, you can get it for free if you want to sign up for the mailing list. I'm not going to do that right now, but we can take a look at the sample. So where are my glasses? All right, let's get serious. Generating an Underworld Layout. A mega dungeon is made up of smaller constituent dungeons. To randomly generate a mega dungeon layout, grab the Major Arcana deck. All right, so this is another one of those things that uses tarot. So for folks, I know you're out there who like to use tarot cards, here's another chance to use them. So you're going to grab that deck. You're going to draw a number of Major Arcana cards equal to the number of levels you want your mega dungeon to have. You want at least 3, but the upper limit is only determined by your ambition. 5 is a good achievable number. Place the card with the lowest number down. This is the main entrance to the Underworld. Place the card with the lowest number down. What is the lowest? Don't the Major Arcana, do they have? Am I thinking of the Major Arcana? That's like the Hermit and the Fool and that stuff? Do they have numbers? Or am I confusing it and I should be thinking about the 2 of Cups, 3 of Cups, blah, blah, blah. Place the card with lowest number down. This is the main entrance to the Underworld, and I have a tarot deck, but it's out of reach, so I can't get it to check. Just to go back in the chat, No Fun Allowed said they're happy with the subreddit. Some of my posts have gotten lots of up votes. Yeah. Yeah, I've had why I come here is I find that the ROSR is pretty even keeled. Don't get anything crazy, and they post a lot of good stuff. Um, let's see. Getting back to this. Okay, Bruce Mayer says there are usually numbers on the cards. The major arcana usually number 1 to 22. Okay, thanks. I'm not a tarot expert by any means, and I'm away from my cards to check specifically. Okay, if you have any cards with values 1 to 5, place them all perpendicular to the entrance. These are the upper tier of the underworld. Each of these levels also have entrances to the surface. Decide if these entrances are traversable and known or sealed in secret. Place the card with the highest number below the entrance card. This is the lowest level of the underworld. Place. Oh, Meyer. Okay. Sorry about that. I aim to please when it comes to pronouncing things as far as I can. Place the rest of the cards between the upper tier and lower tier. This is the middle tier of the underworld. No tarot deck. A d20 will do in a pinch. Just reroll duplicates. All right. And then you're going to draw connections between these levels. These connections provide pathways for your players to traverse the underworld. Any card that is tangent to another has a connection. Any card that is sequential to another has a connection. E.g., dungeons 4 and 5 are connected, as are 5 and 6. Any card that can be divided by another card has a connection. All right, so that one's a little bit more complicated. So Dungeon 12 is connected to Dungeons 2, 3, 4, and 6, right? Right, because 12 is divisible by 2, it's divisible by 3, divisible by 4, and divisible by 6. All right. Is there another sample page here? The Chariot, the belly of the beast. So I guess for the actual... So if we had pulled this card, then this would be this would how it would translate, I guess, to the theme of this particular part of the of this mega dungeon. So here we have the Chariot, belly of the beast. The primordial world serpent Apep long gnawed upon the roots of the underworld until he choked on the sins of the living and died. Now he's stinking up the place. There are many things that the world serpent swallowed: monuments, tyrants, cathedrals, rival primordials, martyrs, magic swords, sailing galleys. They're all lying in the world serpent's belly, ready to be reclaimed. It's like somebody took a museum of pre-recorded history and shoved it into a series of reeking subway train cars made of meat. Meat. You enter through its jaws. Remember, even dead snakes can still bite. Is that a thing? Do dead snakes still bite? And crawl down the tunnel of its esophagus into its spacious stomach chambers. And then it looks like they're kind of breaking down the theme here into a number of things. We have sights, we have sounds, we have smell and taste. So we're covering the senses, right? The 5 senses there. We have whether it's lighting or what the nature of the lighting would be, what structures are there, common monsters, and the dungeon lord, which I guess would be sort of the you want to call it the lord of this particular area. We want to use a meta term like a boss or mini boss. So the sights are a litany of strange objects, from the minuscule to the monolithic, sitting in about 6 inches of bile. Yummy. The sounds, the buzzing of flies, the rumbling of digestion, and the slow dripping of fluids. Smell and taste, a sweet stench, but not entirely rotten, akin to the formaldehyde-soaked frogs you dissected in high school. No light. And then the structures are tunnel-like passages, usually about 15 feet high and 15 feet wide. Walls and ceilings are made of tissue and cartilage. Doors, such as they are valves and sphincters. And the monsters common in this area are melancholic imps, dire tapeworms, dire rats, hellflies, skeleton jellies, green slime, and various stomach prisoners, which I guess could be just about anything. And the dungeon lord is the still beating heart. I'm not sure. You have to maybe play around with that. I kind of like the idea if the snake was still alive, you could get in or be sucked in. And it seems like if the esophagus is only 15 feet high and 15 feet wide, it can't really have eaten too much. And that's not that big for something that's eating the world. So I might amp those up a bit, but that's cool. And, okay, there we have the cover. All right, so that's Dungeon Seeds. You can get it for free. I will drop this into the chat in case folks are interested. If people are interested in me, maybe I'll figure out if I can get a hold of it. It does look like it's got some interesting stuff. Yeah, it seems to be it's system agnostic. And then if we're interested in his Magic Worm, it's a fantasy dungeon crawling game that's currently in development. Okay. And you can get it for $5 or sign up and get it for free. I will go back here, right? Give an upvote to your Redditors. Let's go back and see what else is here. Ooh, someone made a Hex Crawling Map. Oh, Bruce Myers said they couldn't find the title on itch, but they found it by my link. Great. Yeah, I don't know. They do weird things. I don't know if it could be how they submitted it or whether it just... Sometimes on those sites, the searching, it's kind of wonky. We got a Hex Crawling Map. Oh, that's right. That's nice. I don't know if it's made out of cork or... That's really cool. Oh, I like it. I like those kinds of physical things. Upvote to Redditors. Are older D&D editions easier to homebrew? The answer is yes. Too lazy, don't read. Homebrewing 5th edition. Oh, this was by Amb Flower. Homebrewing 5e takes me a long time because you have to account for everything. Our older editions better in that regard. I decided to return to 5e after a long break, during which we mostly played Call of Cthulhu, some OSR stuff, and weird little things like Rises. I planned a one-on-one sesh with my girlfriend, as she's the only player I have at the moment, and came up with a little quest about killing an elder dragon that's magically shrank to pseudo-dragon size. The idea of playing good old D&D kitchen sink fantasy again felt warm and fuzzy, but then I started to tinker with the stat blocks. Problem number 1, I don't have a monster manual, only a PHP, because where I live, money is 5 times more expensive. Money is 5 times more expensive, or things are 5 times more expensive? Problem 2, because my party is one person, I had to adjust the standard 5e creatures, which are basically impossible to defeat if you are too low level. Problem 3, I simply can't plan an interesting game without inventing my own stuff, so I spent 4 hours of my life tweaking stat blocks. Miserable experience. All right, I'm just going to skip down. Is it better in older versions? Are the stat blocks more lightweight and easy on the fly, or is it a game design project for every encounter? So, yes. I mean, I feel like anyone in this chat, in the stream, is probably always aware. Yes, OSR games in general are much easier to homebrew than 5th edition. I'm kind of surprised they're even asking this question, since it seemed like they had played some OSR stuff. And since most of the OSR stuff is based in some way on older versions of D&D, it would have been kind of ipso facto just been self-evident that it's easier to homebrew. But yes, it is. You don't have to worry in OSR, or let's say just go back to BX or BECME or something like that. But a lot of the stuff that 5e is super concerned about, it's a lot more loosey-goosey in that regard. So yes, it is very much easier to homebrew. Not to say that you can't run into trouble homebrewing it, just like you can anything else, but in general, yes, it is easier. I don't really have anything else to say on that. It's kind of just a, yes, it is. Is it easier? Yes. All right, let's go see what else, and then take an upvote. It's okay for players to get a win sometimes. All right, this one should be interesting. This was posted by Shallow Whalmer. That's all, really. I sometimes see people saying sleep or light or levitate is too useful or too powerful, or that a module contains too much treasure or too many +1 swords, you name it. I think some people, like I did, come in new to RPGs and new to OSR, or they've been away for a long time, and you see some things that would seem overpowered for characters in other games. But these guys die at 0 HP and have to start all over. Rerolled stats, that's 16 decks gone. They roll for random encounters every 10 minutes in the dungeon, with creatures coming out with 8 tentacles and 8 attacks. All of them paralyzing you if you fail your save. It's a mean, mean world. If you cast sleep and the whole goblin mob topples, or you turn undead, that ghoul, and he flees, or you use light to blind the ogre and he never gets another attack, or you find 5,000 gold pieces in his lair, that's okay. That feels good. Sometimes they're going to win. Don't take that away from them. It's not unsatisfying. It's the contrast that makes that grim, painful, deadly, chaotic journey in between so worthwhile. I don't have any arguments with that. It absolutely is fine to let them win, and it's fun. And yes, a lot of those times, I haven't really heard people say in the OSR circles that say sleep or light or levitate are too powerful. I feel like people get more into that in 5th edition and modern games, mostly because the balancing factor of how many spells you can cast at a given time is gone, or it's not gone, but it's just different. So some things are more spammable than they used to be. But yeah, look, sleep has been a powerful spell for a long time, but it doesn't scale very well. At a certain point, things just get too powerful to be put to sleep. And at low levels, that might be the only spell you're able to cast in a day. So you get to make it count. And that's assuming you get sleep. A lot of games I've been in, frankly, games I've run, I've rolled randomly for spells. So sometimes you end up with magic users that know, like, read magic and something else. Or maybe just read magic, which is not eminently useful in situations like that. So if you manage to get sleep, use it. I've never seen light used for blinding purposes, but I'd probably give them a roll. If it, depending on what kind of effect we're looking at and who is doing it. Levitate's another one. I guess I don't see these as big deals. So I'm kind of curious where this person's been, where Shallow Whalmer has been to see these kinds of arguments, because I can't say that I've seen them. If any of you guys in the chat have seen any of these, and I'm been blissfully unaware of some kind of controversy surrounding these spells, let me know. I think there is a general thing sometimes, as GMs will often talk about the game being too easy or whatnot, and OSR, it's tough, right? You start off with a few hit points. You're generally dead when you get to 0, though different OSR games play differently with that, and I've tweaked those rules for my own game, so not necessarily true. I definitely do not roll for random encounters every 10 minutes. I'm not sure what dungeons they're playing, and certainly while there's a chance that someone could come out with 8 tentacles and 8 attacks, not very likely at low levels. So, it may be a little exaggeration there, but yeah, sure. In general, yes, I agree. I'm just curious what some of the comments are. Doom Hobbit says, rule number 1 is to do what your table thinks is fun. Don't listen to people who tell you you're having fun wrong. Very true. I think people play up the ruthlessness and deadliness of old school games a little too much. Lots of people have house rules that tone down the deadliness of rules as written, e.g. negative hit points. It's been that way since the earliest days. Also very true. NJ Harmon says, the players should win most of the time. If they aren't because you're being a dick DM, stop that. If they aren't because they lack OSR player skill, then step back and teach them out of character or with a DM NPC. I would say Ixnay on the MNPC DA. Don't use the DM NPC. I mean, you don't have to in OSR games. They can get hirelings. They can do it. But yes, definitely teach them out of character. Motor Hum says, I always want my players to win. I just want them to be challenged. Yes. I can't say I'm wrong with that, though. I don't actually set things up to challenge the players. I think the world, if you just set it up, I think is challenging enough. Farm Monitor 9116 says the players have the option of earning a win. Yes. I don't know what that means exactly, the option of earning a win, but okay. So maybe not as controversial as this Redditor might have been thinking, at least in this subreddit. Let's give them an upvote. Advice for compact dungeons. It was the game prep question. Yes, sir. Sign me up. This was posted by Wicked _ botanist. Do you have any advice, tips, methods you use for writing smaller dungeons? As much as I would love to run a multi-session sandbox dungeon, the reality is that my group plays 2 to 3 hour online sessions with a very irregular schedule, and when we gather, some players hardly remember what happened the last time. In these circumstances, I believe the most reasonable way to play is an 8 to 10 room one-shot dungeon. However, with this size, I find it hard to implement some OSR elements like non-linear maps or faction play. Any thoughts? Well, I would say first, faction play doesn't have anything to do with dungeons or dungeon size. You could skip all the dungeons and just play an overworld wilderness settlement game and have factions. So it's like the faction part out of it, unless they mean factions in the dungeon, in which case, if it's a small dungeon, you're not going to tend to have a whole bunch of warring forces, right? If you have orcs, goblins, and trolls all fighting over an area, and the area is a single room, doesn't really make sense. But again, like I just said, you can have factions in your overworld, so maybe this dungeon isn't split into factions, but the territory in which the dungeons reside is split up by factions, so you could still have your faction play. I think for these kinds of one-shot type dungeons, I think using the 5-room dungeon design is a good one. In that case, you're kind of ditching we're going to map it out and go room to room to room, and you're instead thinking in terms of thematics, in terms of particular obstacles, and then just allowing the party to navigate through those spaces. So you might say in a 5-room dungeon scenario, instead of having a labyrinth in which the party is actually mapping out and trying to figure out how to get through this maze, what you're going to do instead is narrate how the corridors and the maybe there's multiple branching paths and the confusing nature about it, and then the party will try to figure out in the fiction how to solve that. One of them might be, I have chalk, I'm going to mark on the walls, we're always going to go left, all right, or I'm going to use the old breadcrumbs, put those down, okay, or some other method. And then instead of them actually doing the mapping to figure it out, you'll just walk it through fictionally until they get to the next area that might be something else. And you can look up the 5-room dungeon I've done a video on it. There's plenty of resources if you look up 5-Room Dungeon, but essentially you're abstracting away the kind of navigational stuff and focus on the themes and then particular obstacles or opportunities in those themes. And it usually is some combination of, sure, there might be a combat encounter, there might be social encounter, there might be investigation, exploration, sort of a mix in there. But you can check that out. So that's what I would do in that case if I was just running that kind of game. Though, to be honest, my home game, which I will be playing tonight, has those same things. 2 to 3 hour online session. Our schedule is actually fairly regular, though we miss here and there. And yes, though it seems at times folks have a hard time remembering what we just did and maybe doing some kind of recap, I haven't found picking up and going back and being in the dungeon a big deal. So I have just stuck with regular dungeons, even though my game sessions are not any longer than this person's. But of course, it's going to be, your miles may vary with your group. So, do what works for them. That's that one. Oops, I forgot to upvote. And an upvote for the Redditor. What would a DCC and MCC sci-fi spin-off look like? I don't know enough about MCC. Well, this looks good. Here's a discussion topic. Chaos, in quotes, versus chaotic. This one was posted, by Grim Thing. He says, or they say, I grew up playing AD&E 2nd Edition when I was a kid during the aughts, alongside Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, et al. So I've always predominantly known alignment from the 9-axis perspective. The notion of cosmic law versus chaos, instead of, or more importantly than, good versus evil, has always been slightly abstract to me. I have quite some experience with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 1st and 2nd editions, and of course they have their gods of law versus their gods of chaos. But I always hand-waved a lot of that, and now I see Games Workshop were likely influenced by the same things as Gygax et al., parenthetically Michael Moorcock. I wonder if anyone could share some stories, anecdotes, etc. to help understand what many games portray as primal chaos, which seems nearly always to be destructive and bad, as opposed to a chaotic disposition, a la chaotic good warrior who does the right thing for the good people, but in his own way. For example, thanks, Grim. So I use the law and chaos in my BX game. I like to think of them as they're just really just massive cosmic forces that are essentially beyond the comprehension of the individuals in them. I mean, yes, chaos does tend to, anarchy, destruction, the breaking down of order, and then law, the preservation of order, the building of order, the building of structures and what those things mean. Though often that's very abstract to the people who are, we're so zoomed in. It's kind of like if you have I like to think of it like you have a steel girder or a building, right? And it's, and you're looking at it from a certain distance away and you see the steel beams and it seems very orderly, right? But then if you were to take an electron microscope or something and you zoom down and get down to the atomic level of those steel beams, right? You see all the atoms, everything's kind of moving around. There's spaces in between these things that look solid, solid steel, right, to us. But in this, getting down in that kind of quantum realm, all of a sudden it's kind of crazy and it seems almost chaotic. And that's kind of how I think of it. In the players, this prime material plane, so zoomed in that even the law and chaos, it's all intermixed. But their little results of their actions and the results of the other actions and everything building up leads up in this other sense. If you were able to zoom up far enough out, which people aren't able to do, they would see either a strengthening girder or a crumbling girder, depending on whether chaos or law is winning and affecting the overall structure. That's how I tend to think of it. And anyway, we got some responses here. The Cold Iron Kid posted, okay, I think the Planescape notion of demons versus devils is a good place to start to understand the law versus chaos concept. The problem is, in Planescape, the Abyss and Limbo are all the planes of chaos, and all the planes of chaos are just another part of the wheel, part of the cosmic balance, and I think that sends the wrong signal. Instead, think of the cosmic balance as heaven, hell, and the earth between. This is the natural, orderly, lawful arrangement of reality. So the beings administering the functions of the universe, devils and angels alike, are lawful in alignment. Now imagine that demons, the expressions of chaos in the universe, come not from the chaotic, evil, aligned plane of the abyss, but from the far realm. They are from outside the natural order. When they chew their way into reality, it disrupts the proper functions of the universe, and space-time begins to corrode. This is why they are considered chaotic. They mess up what should be. So yeah, that's one of the major ways to treat law versus chaos. Another way I saw someone describe it once was, when Ragnarok comes, will you fight alongside Odin to save the world or alongside Cthulhu to destroy it? And that describes an individual's alignment. There are other ways to think of law versus chaos as well. God versus Satan, civilization versus savage wilderness, perfectly logical machines versus messy organic life, science versus magic, etc. I guess the trick is to define what you want the law to be in a campaign, then determine what the opposing principle to define chaos. I mean, probably that last part I would definitely say is good, right? In your campaign, figure out what it means, what law means to you. Is it just something super abstract that doesn't really have much meaning in your everyday life? Is it something more in the, say, Tolkien aspects of corruption and good, where it's something that is very active and almost visible in the daily life? And then you can set your creatures, things to behave accordingly. JunkJawer123 says, the original Empire of the Petal Throne game called the alignment stability and change, drawing from South Asian cosmology. That could be one thing to look into to find your own interpretation. While I find the whole cosmic alignment thing interesting, I think it's a bit of OSR revisionism. The BX alignment descriptions say that good and lawful and evil are chaotic, and chaotic are pretty much equivalents. Might be that way in the 77 home set too. I think that's probably how it was played back in the day as well. Even earlier, evil high priests were definitely assumed to be chaotic. I guess my point is not to stress over too much. You're free to interpret them however you want. Yeah, I think for the most part, the stuff that's chaos tends to be stuff that is evil. And if you look at the original monster lists, I think in general, either the stuff that was in the chaos side was basically stuff that was pretty much evil, and then a few things crossed over, and then you had things like humans that could be either of them. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with going with, chaotic, because chaos is basically evil and law is basically good. Charles Edward Dumland, that's a mouthful, says, there are two cosmic forces and their struggle is the basis for all reality. Chaos, ever striving for entropy, the unbinding of everything, the negative dialectic, and law, ever working for structure, shaping and building reality until it's a solid state, the positive dialectic. Only the wisest of mortals is even aware of a sliver of the secret nature of reality. Your character may have a destiny to play a special part in this endless war. If so, you are either chaotic or lawful. If not, you are neutral. Not sure. Is that quoting one of the books? It's in quotes, so I'm assuming it's quoting something. But Mr. Charles Edward Dumlin does not say what. This is what I tell players when I'm going for a cosmic forces type alignment thing. Note, it doesn't have any implications for the moral character or personality type of the player's characters. This is because I'd rather the players thought in concrete moral terms rather than abstract ones, i.e., what are the moral implications of what I'm doing right now, as opposed to I'm cheeky good, what can I do that's good, but in a cheeky way. I'm not always trying to run something where the players are thinking about moral ambiguity and ethics, so then I just fall to law equals good, K equals bad, neutral equals I'm walking here. Yeah, these are all good points. All right, I think I will I think that's enough. I think that's enough to get a good sense. Folks, if you got some interesting ways you handle law and chaos, let me know. I like the simplicity of it. I like kind of alignment both ways. I do think there is some value to a little bit of having alignment as that predictive, at least at the start, quality that if you say you're chaotic good, that does say something about what your character's like and gives you a basis to roleplay them until you figure out more about them. I think I like it descriptive after that, right? It's sort of prescriptive when you're starting out because it gives you that baseline. Okay, I'm a Robin Hood type. Then that kind of informs my character that I'll do Robin Hood things. And then at a certain point, I don't need that anymore since I've formed my character, and then I can just play it from there, right? But I don't know. I like alignment. I think it could probably be fixed, and I know that it has its shortcomings, but I'm not sure that the alternatives or lack of them are much better. Let's see. So we've got, all right, I did give them an upvote. Dying Heroically. It looks like that one is a blog post. Should we take a look? Yeah, let's take a look. This was posted on I'll post in the chat. Leicester's Ramble. All right, just we're typing this in here. Dying heroically. Posted on, today. Posted today. Here we go. I recently watched Daniel Norton's discussion on alternatives to death. I believe that's Bandit's Keep. Friend of the channel. I haven't watched that video yet. I need to watch it. I recently watched Daniel Norton's discussion on alternatives to death at 0 hit points. While most games I've played intend towards expiration at 0 HP, I have played in a game using Cave Girl's Horrible Wounds table. My PCs have avoided its effects, but I recall a henchman cleric now has a serious speech impediment from taking a swinging log trap to the face. Likewise, I've followed the 10 Dead Rats AP, and the critical injuries table in their house rules has been used with some effect. So while death is certainly still on the table, it's not a sure thing, nor is it necessarily saved away as in certain modern editions. So, an alternative that I'm thought experimenting here, at 0 HP, one still dies, but has the chance to go out in a blaze of glory. In Pathfinder, orcs have ferocity, the ability to make an individual or an additional final attack or other action upon being reduced to 0 HP, dying the following round unless healed. So, give the characters an opportunity to die a cinematic death via one final action upon hitting 0 HP. They still die at 0 HP, but there's a chance to slightly salve the wounds of losing a PC by closing out their chapter with something cool. Now, not every character gets to take this action. After all, most will still die ignominiously in the dark, shanked by a goblin, melted by slime, bonked by a falling rock trap, etc. So here goes. Roll to save versus death, because, of course, upon a successful save, the PC may take one final glorious action the next combat round before expiring. This is tailored for combat, as that is when these actions may have more relevancy, but there are other opportunities to play this out, traps, natural hazards, etc. The player states what action their doomed hero will take, and the GM adjudicates target numbers and effects. With a success, the player then narrates the final moment of Pyrrhic glory, followed by an appropriate moment of silence. And they give some examples here. We've got a fighter, one last all-out strike, push, grapple an enemy over the chasm edge, dive in front of a comrade and take damage meant for them. A mage might cast one last spell, or alternatively spellburn, release any stored magical enemies from uncast spells and an arcane conflagration. A cleric may solicit their deity for one final blessing or curse. And a thief may stab him in the back and then take all the trap damage. Of course, these actions are flexible and not specifically relevant to any particular magic notwithstanding. Anyone can likely find that terminal courage to dive in front of a blade or grenade or fireball. Although their success is not guaranteed, it provides a moment of character closure rather than just, you're at 0, roll up another PC. Oh, and throw in some poignant and or defiant dying words goes without saying. And then they link to Sean Bean's Death Reel just because. Posted by Vance A. I like this idea. I actually think you could probably combine all this stuff. I think you could ask a PC, what do they want to do? Do they want to take a go and on whatever horrible wound table, if you want to go that route and have one? Or you can try to go out in a blaze of glory. Maybe give them a choice. You could even maybe put it all together, right? You could have that roll versus death and have that roll actually just dictate. If you roll within certain things, you get to have that last action, and then you can go down. I've given to having some ways to do some negative hit points, and the reason why I've gone that route is I like the added tension. I've said this before and other things. I like when there's opportunities for actions, and it's additive to the tension and just the moment at the table. So I would rather give somebody extra rounds of life when that's going to lead to more interesting decisions and actions than to say they die. And I did that with poisons, and I thought it turned out pretty well, which is having a slow, lingering death from poison as opposed to a quick death. The slow, lingering death puts more pressure on the party to try to figure out what to do with this character who's dying. When you just go to 0, or in the case of a poison, you just die like that, there's no decisions. It says, okay, loot the body and go. But now if you realize you have an hour while this poor character is slowly choking on their own blood, and you're in the middle of a dungeon, now you've got these decisions to make. Do you try to find a way, go back out and try to find something in the wilderness to try to heal them? Do you hope you can find a potion or something in the dungeon around? And if they are just going to loot them and leave them, it's a lot more of a moral quandary when they're still potentially alive. Because usually in dungeon, you're not going to want to wait an hour or two for when they're dying. And plus, are you going to carry this person around? Are you going to drag them to a corner and leave them? I like that stuff. I feel like it adds more to the game, so I want to encourage that. So that's why I do it. I do not do horrible wounds, though, because I don't have a lot of health. Healing is kind of hard to come by in my campaign. I think it's already kind of tough. I might look at this horrible wounds table, but in general, I kind of like to think in the sort of Conan-ish sort of thing that if you survive, you kind of survive okay, and if you don't, you don't, and not going too far into that middle ground of now you're potentially permanently disfigured. But I might check out that table. I guess we can, well, you know what? Let's just check it out right now. Okay, this is posted on Cave Girls Game Stuff blog. Chat. This is from Thursday, August 16th, 2018. Horrible wounds in OSR games. I don't like death at 0. From a player side, it's abrupt and always feels arbitrary, and from the ref side, it's both quite punishing and doesn't cause enough complications. I don't care about the punishing part, but I do agree on the complications part. When characters hit 0, I want them to suffer. They get chopped up, start bleeding, lose body parts, get messed up. Characters that drop to 0 should acquire scars and problems. They should risk death, but have a chance to avoid it if swift medical attention is received. It's worth noting that, compared to death at 0, these rules are not as forgiving as you might think. Being stuck with a PC who's missing 2 limbs or brain damage is a pretty big nerf compared to just getting to roll up a new, perfectly healthy PC. These are the rules I use. They've been play tested a decent amount and work for what I want them to do. They are also, incidentally, remarkably similar to the rules that I put in Wolfpacks and Winter Snow and Esoteric Enterprises. Okay, so she's got a couple of products that she's put those in. Let me just look at here. Lonnie Chat, that is. Lonnie Tucker says, this is a newbie question, but I have to ask, how does a magic user / cleric cast spells to hit? Is it the same rules that apply to weapons, such as roll to meet or beat AC, or is there another method? Well, I think, in 5th edition, I think maybe starting in, I want to say 3rd edition, you had to make touch attacks for some spells, which would be essentially or ranged touch attacks, which, if you think about what the word means, a touch attack, what it means is essentially armor doesn't so much matter. It's just, could you actually just reach out and touch them? Not even just to do damage, just touch them, because that's all the spell needs to do. The spell doesn't need to penetrate armor or find a crack in the armor or a seam. It just needs to touch you. So if it can touch you, then it would make the effect. So some spells you'd have to kind of, almost like you're shooting a ray gun, you're pointing your wand, like in zappy, right? And then you touch them with the spell and it would go off. And then other ones might have other things. I don't know if there's anything. I feel like all the spells, like in BX and those things, you're just doing saves. I have my books here. Let me see if something like, I don't know if a spell like Lightning Bolt, which would be one that would come to mind, is potentially having an aiming factor might enter into it. Let me see what we've got here. There's Disintegrate. Do we have Lightning Bolt? Telekinesis, Teleport, Control Weather. What order are these in? They don't. Here we go. All right, so let's take Lightning Bolt. And this is right out of the Expert book. The spell creates a 5-foot wide, 6-foot, 60-foot long bolt of lightning anywhere within its range. Any creatures within the area of effect take damage. It does 1d6 points of damage per level. The spellcaster, if the lightning bolt strikes a solid surface before reaching it, okay, it's going to bounce back. Yeah, so essentially what you would do then is you would essentially just say, okay, it's coming from my square because it's 5 feet wide. So if you think about it in squares, if you can picture the grid, you would just say for your magic user, okay, I'm here. There's my 5-foot grid. And just boop, it goes. No particular rolls to hit. This is not the place to ask such a basic question. Please disregard. There's no bad place, no improper place here, and I hope I answered the question. So the answer is, at least as far as BX goes, no, you don't have to roll to hits. For spells like that, there might be an exception in there, and of course other OSR systems might have implemented hits, but not generally, to my knowledge, which is very limited. All right, back to horrible wounds, applying horrible wounds. Rather than instantly dying at 0, PCs and other important characters instead suffer specific horrible wounds which may kill them. either instantly or over time, or else leave them with dramatic injuries as their bodies are permanently mutilated. When damage reduces you to 0 HP or less, or you take any damage when you already had no HP, look at the exact amount of damage dealt and get a result from the list below. It doesn't matter how far into the negatives you are, just look at the result of the dice. Except for penalties from actual energy and injuries, you can keep on going just fine on 0. Adrenaline can do impressive things. There are 6 sets of wounds to look the damage up on depending on what caused it. They are ballistics. That's for bullets, explosives, and other extremely high energy impacts. And then we have ripping for knives, teeth, claws, and other sharp physical damage. Bludgeoning for hammers, falling masonry, fists, and other blunt physical damage. Burns for fire, acid, digestive enzymes, or other substances that physically corrode, burn, or eat away at flesh. Shocks for electricity and perhaps extreme cold, radiation, or other dangers that suddenly stun or shock the body into uselessness. And finally, toxins for poison, sickness, and other hazardous substances that make the body ill. I'm not sure why there are dashes in substances. Is that some alternate spelling I'm not aware of? Some really nasty damage ignores hit points and goes straight to causing these wounds. This is the sort of thing that would be insta-death in a game without wounds. Being reduced to 0 in a stat still just kills you instantly. The increasing penalties for lowering stats is a good representation of the body or mind weakening. The same applies to instant death effects, such as some poisons or spells. Those just kill you right away. Similarly, against a helpless victim, you can just kill them without needing to make damage rolls. It might be messy and unpleasant, but if they can't stop you, they'll die eventually. These rules are best reserved for PCs and significant NPCs and monsters, those important enough to earn a name and notable place in the fiction. For minor NPCs, wandering monsters, and so on, just have them die at 0 to avoid the game getting too bogged down. Ongoing damage. Sometimes a character is brought to 0 flesh. Brought to 0 flesh? Maybe they mean HP. By a source of damage that continues each round or turn. Being on fire, breathing in toxic fumes, or being immersed in acid are good examples of this sort of thing. For as long as the effect keeps damaging them, they keep taking the appropriate horrible wound each round or turn, with one modification. If they would suffer a horrible wound already inflicted on them by that damage source, they instead take the next one down. If that one has also been suffered, look at the one below it, and so on until there is a new wound to suffer. In this way, the wound suffered from ongoing damage will get progressively worse the longer the victim is left, making death near inevitable without some sort of intervention. Fatigue. A character who is physically drained and cannot move without difficulty suffers a few penalties. They move as if heavily encumbered and go last in initiative. They regain only 1 HP whenever they would recover HP. Bleeding to death. A character who starts bleeding out can survive for as many rounds as they have hit dice adjusted by their constitution modifier. For example, a first level character, who therefore has 1 hit die, with +2 constitution, bleeds to death in 3 rounds. Character can attempt an intelligence roll to staunch the bleeding. This takes a round, and if successful, slows the bleed to a rate of turns rather than rounds. Failed, then the character loses additional blood as the medic interferes with them. They have 1 less round of bleed time every time a medic fails to staunch their bleeding. A character can also attempt to properly treat the bleeding of a character bleeding at a rate of turns. I'm not sure what that means. Doing so is more involved, so it takes a full turn. If successful, the patient stops bleeding entirely. If failed, the patient's bleeding is again accelerated by a full turn. Magical healing, such as cure light wounds or a potion, automatically ends the bleeding. Okay. Okay, now this is longer than I thought. Dead men walking. Sometimes death is basically inevitable, but not immediate. This is referred to as being a dead man walking. As a dead man walking, you get 1 more round to act in, and then you die. If you have a constitution bonus, you get that many extra rounds. Nothing can be done to stop this. A dead man walking's death sentence is merely slightly delayed, but still irrevocable. Healing horrible wounds. Some horrible wounds create an immediate effect, such as knocking the victim unconscious or causing them to begin bleeding out. These might be fixed with an appropriate roll and a round, or sometimes turn, spent treating the victim. If the roll fails, the victim suffers additional wounds from the botched procedure. Roll a d8 on the appropriate list, and they suffer that wound. More permanent wounds, such as lost body parts and mutilation, cannot be fixed in this way. Sometimes reconstructive surgery is possible. If doctors are employed to rebuild the character, then the process will likely take several months to be finished, due to waiting times, the search for donors, recovery times, and so on, during which they are effectively out of commission. Even in places where the practice of medicine is advanced, access to surgeons this sophisticated is limited. Alternatively, magic such as regenerate might be required to restore the body, as spells like cure light wounds are not sufficient. All right, let's finally get into the wounds themselves. Ballistic wounds. This damage table should be used for bullets. All right, so I'm not going to redo the description. So we have 1 damage. The shot rips through internal organs, starting a slow internal bleeding. Bleeding out at a rate of turns rather than rounds. All right, so this is a slow internal bleeding. That's 1 damage. 2 damage. You got a leg a bullet has impact ruins a leg. Hopping around, now you're relying on hopping around or using crutches. You can't run. You get disadvantage to rolls requiring physical agility. If both go, you're on the floor, unable to get about at all. Now you can crawl. 3 damage, you get an arm ruined. Right? 4 damage, you're bleeding out quickly. 5 damage, your leg is completely gone, essentially, and you're bleeding out. 6 damage, your arm is gone and you're bleeding out. 7 damage, you got hit in the head, but you're still alive, but you're bleeding out. 8 damage, you're dying. Dead man walking, basically. 9 damage. Oof. You're a dead man walking, you're knocked unconscious for a round. So basically, unless you have a constitution bonus, you're just dead right then. But potentially, you're dead man walking. 10 to 15, you're just headshot, you're gone. 16 or more, you've been ripped to bits. You're splattered. Now we get into the ripping wounds. Yeah, 1 damage, your eyes messed up, your perception is disadvantage to perception. 2 damage, back to leg is messed up. Arms messed up at 3 damage. 4 damage, you're bleeding out. So a lot of these are kind of similar. Not entirely similar, right? And then 5 and 6 are your same things as we got before. These are all basically the same, just instead of being ballistic in nature, of really more the description, right? It's now slashing. Bludgeoning, lose an action because you're just in pain. It's 2 damage, you're knocked unconscious. 3 damage, you're knocked unconscious and you're fatigued. And then 4, you get back into your arms or legs are busted up, your head's busted up, you're bleeding out from internal damage, got a brain injury. Now you're basically a dead man walking. Okay, so then the same kind of things. Shocking. So these are all variations on the same. I feel like I'm just reading similar things. So at the lower damages, you're either losing turns, you could be knocked out, you could be getting poked in the eye, so to speak. And then obviously it goes up from there. And there we go. They could have written this out a little more nicely. I feel like a little bit better formatting of the table would make it a lot. Could be more instantly useful, but I like it. It's an interesting system. Would anyone use horrible wounds, or not necessarily this horrible wounds, but just wounds in general in your OSR game? Let me know. I'd be curious to know if you did or not. We can head back. There's another house rules there. I'm not going to cover that one. Dying heroically. Wow, see, this is my problem with Redditors. What exactly was so horrible at that guy's post that you're downvoting it? There was nothing wrong with that post. It was on topic as far as OSR games. The man or the person, that individual, did not deserve a downvote. But you can have my upvote, Leicester68. Or is it Leicester, like Leicester City? Probably Leicester, not Leicester. Leicester68. Take my upvote. All right, we got some illustrations. I'm okay. Some Dungeon Synth album. I'm all right. I don't know much about DCC Adventures, so I'm going to skip that one. Here we go. Read aloud box. Yay or nay? It was posted by OK Student 961. What do you think about the read aloud box in Adventures? I mean, in the sense of a more narrative description instead of usual tone of the DM. I often see DMs, including me, going Shakespeare acting on read aloud boxes. I used to like that, but now I think it's breaking the game rhythm and are a bit misplaced. I'm curious, what are you doing and thinking about that? I mean, I'm torn on the use of read aloud boxes. I see their value. but often I don't love them using them myself, just because sometimes the information I think is most important about the situation is not where I think it should be in the read aloud box. Usually I think if there's a monster in the middle of the room, it should be number one. Sometimes I find they put it last, like they'll describe the whole room and then think, oh yeah, there are 3 bugbears standing there. Where in my case, I always want to say there are 3 bugbears standing there, and then that's the main thing. And then after you've dealt with that, however you do deal with that, then we can get into more of the details of the room. So stuff like that. I'm torn. I don't know about going into Shakespearean, acting on it. Kelry says hard pass. I'm not sure what they mean. They're fun. I tell my players, here comes some flavor text. Then go really on the top with it. Yeah, that's fine. But I feel like that's a little too meta. Here comes the flavor text. It's funny, but I wouldn't do it. All right. Maybe that wasn't as interesting. Feel good, OSR adventures and settings. I'm kind of interested in this one. This was by Sigmoid. I have noticed a definite fashion current in OSR going for wanton edginess with world-eating eldritch god viruses, endless wastes of broken hopelessnesses, and similar aesthetic choices. Sometimes this unapologetic horror approach can be what people want, and the deadliness of OSR play undoubtedly meshes well with it. But honestly, I'm starting to feel a bit hungry for more feel-good scenarios. I mean stuff that is more Robert E. Howard or Edgar Rice Burroughs than H.P. Lovecraft or Jorge Luis Borges. I'm curious what your favorite OSR settings and materials are from this more innocent genre. To start off the line, let me link you the absolute gem of Fomalhaut from Gabor Lux, which was my very first contact with OSR and will immediately sold me on it. Okay, I'm going to skip that. Okay, disclaimer, yes, they were both incredibly problematic people and wrote problematic racist stuff in their novels. That's not what I meant. I meant the sort of lighthearted bravado that permeates them, as opposed to the crushing despair that seems to be standard OSR fare recently. And Lovecraft was also plenty problematic, as well as some edgelord OSR big names today who push sort of grimdark horror I'd like to have a break from. Not to bust your bubble, but there's some problematic stuff about Gabor Lux as well. I'm not going to get into it, but you can search for that. So I hate to burst your bubble on that, but he is not exempt from having some issues that have come up. We got some nice links here. A micro setting. Kenley has posted a bunch of stuff. Anyone heard of any of these? I know I've heard of Neverland, but I've never played it. Season of the Moth. Are any of these somewhere free where I could take a look at them? It's a micro setting. That one's an itch. 1,000 Islands. Genial Jack. Ascending on Enormous Whale. Neverland, The Waking of Willoughby Hall. That's a Swordfish Islands. What Ho, Frog Demons. That's on Drive-Thru. Co-creator of Season of the Moth here. We definitely created this as an alternative to the melancholy and doom theme. It's still a very dangerous setting, but also sits as a setting worth protecting. That's nice. Some people pointed out Greyhawk and Mystara. Beyond the Wall. That's a good one. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's any other ones back here. Okay, someone pointed out Dolmenwood, but then some other people said Dolmenwood is dark. I haven't read Dolmenwood, so I don't know. Someone else posted Neverland. I guess it was written for 5e, but might be easy to convert back to OSR. The Blackworm of Brandonsford is another fairy tale-ish setting. The Tower in the Shadow of Tower Silveraxe is another good one. The Witch List Adventure. All right, so we got a bunch of stuff in here. I'm not familiar with really any of these, which is a shame. Maybe I'll have to come back in here and find them. Oh, whoops, I forgot to upvote. Where you go? Take my upvote. Okay, PC. That's a Kickstarter. Oh, here we go. Let's 1d6 effects the blood has. In parentheses, 2 new OSR random tables. I don't know what that means. Let's take a look. All right, I'll put this in the chat. This is from magicuser.wordpress.com. Okay, we've got a lot of ads going on here. Chaos. 1d6 effects. The blood has. That's got that title. Title could use a little help. I'm not gonna lie. That title is a bit rough. For some reason, I posted it in the chat and it didn't go to Twitch. So sorry about that. If you're on Twitch, you didn't get the link that I tried to post. My bad. Let's see. We got a nice. So we get some Cure lyrics to start it off. I'm paralyzed by the blood of Christ, though it clouds my eyes. I can never stop. The Cure. So you got a test tube worth of Christ's blood. Or I guess you can, swap that out with some sort of deity or whatever you'd like. I imagine. I don't know what the asterisk says. Surely you can use it as a grenade or perhaps as a potion. I mean, why not? But its effects may not be so obvious. Okay, so that's what is the asterisk? Or any other imaginary being, of course. Yeah, I probably would have used a different being. Just no reason to potentially raise folks' ire when it doesn't really mean anything. Okay, so if you drink the blood, you gain the ability to cast spells as a cleric 2 levels below your current level. You cannot progress as a cleric. You are not multiclassed. You regenerate your cellular tissue. If you have wounds or scars, they are erased. So if we were using a horrible wounds table, this is a way you could get some of that back. Your hair regains its color. You no longer need glasses. Your HP is full again. If your HP was already full when you ingested the blood, make a saving throw versus poison. If you fail, you gain 1d4 permanent HP. Each week, repeat the above. When the new total is more than double the original value, your blood will mutate and become cancerous. You will gain 1 permanent HP each day, but you will lose 1 permanent con point. As you lose 2% con, tumors, bruises, and oozes will begin to appear all over your body. Now, a miracle could save your life. Goodness. Don't get that unless you need hit points, I don't think. Save versus poison, or you will go blind. From now on, you can only eat fish and bread. All right, you should probably replace that one with something more generic because it only makes sense in the Christian context. The water in your blood turns to wine. Yeah, that's also probably to maybe pick something a little bit different. Let's see. You are now permanently drunk with the penalties this entails. You can revive a single person or animal that died no more than 10 minutes ago. That's pretty specific. You could understand the language of pigeons, snakes, and burning bushes. All right. I kind of wish this, because I feel like they're going for a little bit of a comedy effect here, and I wish it was more serious, because I think there is some interesting things if you're talking about divine or even, I don't know, infernal, creatures, what kind of resource their being could be. But this is kind of jokey. I throw the blood. All right, you could paralyze somebody, blood erupts in a flare of fire in the shape of a cross like Evangelion. All right. Had possibilities, but I'm not trying to do that. All right, but I'm going to give you an upvote. I actually think there in there is a good idea in there, but just their style of delivery is not my style. But I really think you could have something in all kinds of. It's very much a trope of the genre, right? It was a legend and trying to get the blood of the unicorn blood, right? There's all kinds of things about, if you grind up a horn, it does this. If you get this, it does that. So I could see trying to figure out, well, what is some of these creatures or beings from those kind of planes? What can you do with that? So I like the concept, but that's not for me. Found a great sub for OSR inspiration. Okay, I don't care about that. What OSR stuff is at Gen Con this year? I don't know. There's a class jam going on for old school essentials on itch. A detailed look at Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerer of Hyperborea, which I need to do myself, so I certainly can't look at that. Oh, that's by No Fun Allowed. Is that yours, No Fun Allowed? Well, maybe I'll have to look at it then. Usually I don't look at stuff that I feel like I might do myself, but if you're still here in the chat, there's an upvote for you, No Fun Allowed. And if you're not here or it's somebody else, well, they can have the upvote anyway. When does character death occur? All right, this looks interesting. Okay, this is just kind of a poll, I guess. Most of the ongoing games you've played in, when does character death occur? Is it 0? Does it use the -10? Does it use some other rule? Every time a character hits 0, retainer gets their wings. I'm going to give that an upvote. Yep. So we kind of covered that already. Here's an upvote. Don't need to go through it again. Let's go to the next page. Interesting elementals. Let's talk about the Poor Wizard's Almanac. I don't know it, and that's a review. Here we go. Dungeon exploration and action adjudication. That sounds meaty, right? This was posted by a Rusty Broom. That was you. No fun allowed. Great. Awesome. I will check out your video then. Is this the new edition of Astonishing Swordsman? I was thinking about trying to reach out and maybe get a review copy, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm big enough and strong enough to get it. But you got it. Mentioned Eva, clicks away. Hello, yeah. Look, I like a lot of anime. I don't actually know Evangelion that much, but I just know that a lot of stuff that's referencing anime, it's not the kind of stuff that I'm like, all right, I'm out of my zone. So I didn't even really know what the Evangelion reference was to, but I'm like, yeah, okay, this is outside my comfort zone. All right. A Rusty Broom posted about dungeon exploration and action adjudication. Hello, everyone. I recently ran my first one-shot utilizing Knave. Part of Knave is a dungeon exploration mechanic that breaks up players' turns into approximate 10-minute segments. During these turns, I had trouble parsing when to provide an immediate response to a player's action or when that action should be resolved at the end of everyone's turn. For example, in our one-shot, I had one player who wanted to spend their turn thoroughly searching a writing desk. Another player wanted to eat a magic mushroom as their action. The third player spent the whole turn moving their full movement, having opened a door in the process. I told the player who ate the mushrooms what the result of eating the mushroom was right away, but I waited until everyone had finished their turn before telling the player searching the desk what they found. Should I have just told the player searching the desk what they found right away? Should eating the mushroom have counted as an action? Does opening a door count as an action, or do you make it part of that character's movement? Do you play with an idea of what does and doesn't count as an action, or is everything that isn't moving an action? I feel like if a dungeon turn is a whole 10 minutes, searching a 10-foot square area / writing desk or picking a lock is going to take much longer than plucking some mushrooms out of the ground and eating them. And then they apologize for the questions. Any advice? Okay. I think just as a general rule, I just take actions or 10 minutes, includes opening doors, includes picking locks. In terms of this, I would say including the mushrooms as well. Players I haven't found are usually arguing with me over that. Usually I'm just like, okay, you're doing that, you're doing that, you're doing that. Maybe I would say, okay, the mushrooms, this happens. I might say, okay, you eat the mushrooms, this is what's happening. And of course, depending on what the effect of the mushroom is, I could talk about how the effect is coming on that person, but it might take 10 minutes to unfold. If it's something like, oh yeah, I'm just popping out my mouth, maybe I'll just let them do it, let it go. I would definitely wait, say, hey, you spend the 10 minutes and these are the things you find. So you're not doing it in okay, you open the drawer and then you're getting the results of the drawer. It's like you open everything out and then these are the 3 things you found. Okay, in the top drawer, there's this. In the middle drawer, there's that, and this and that, and whatever you find, and that's it. Open the door, same. And movement takes time as well. I think it's about 100. I think I usually use whatever the default is, which I think is 120 feet per 10 minutes. So I do that. No Fun Allowed says, I would love to get a review copy, but I only have 3K subs. I don't know if that's enough clout. Well, you've got 3 times as much clout as I do. No Fun Allowed. So if you don't have the clout, then I don't have the clout. But I always say you can't hurt by asking. So maybe I will ask and see. I mean, especially if it's I wouldn't ask for a hard cover, a printed edition. I would just say, hey, can you shoot me a PDF? Maybe it'll work. Probably won't. I actually have, and I have an older copy, but I am interested to see what they do with the 3rd edition of Astonishing Swordsman. Anyway, so getting back to this question. So yeah, I think the adjudication part, you just have to find a thing you're comfortable with. My thing when you're adjudicating stuff is for me anyways, I don't want to get into people arguing with me about what fraction of the turn they're taking. So I just 10 minutes, we're moving on. And and then go. And I find that mostly works. And if you have players who are getting argumentative with you, you kind of can say, okay, we'll just spend some time at the end of this session and we'll just go through it. The thing is, we want to make everything simple. Part of the OSR, right, is we're trying to be simple. We're trying to do it functional and quick. And part of that is like, look, it's just we're marking off time. And sometimes you're going to maybe not get as much out of your 10 minutes as you think, but then other times you might get more out of the 10 minutes than you think. So we're calling it a wash. It's average. We're staying at a level of abstraction that allows us to move things along. No Fun Allowed said the creator just did an interview with Capt Courageous on YouTube. I'm not familiar with their channel. I actually don't watch a lot of other creators, and the reason for that is usually I don't want to potentially get in this thing where am I stealing an idea that I saw somebody else do. Maybe I'll just take a look at it. I don't even know. I'll have to look it up. I'll have to look up the Kickstarter. Yeah, that might be something I'll try. But it's good to know they're out there talking to folks. But here you go. A rusty broom. Take my vote. Player care. Oh, this is another good one. All right, so I think I'm going to go for 20 more minutes if folks can hang with me or feel like hanging with me before I call it quits. This should be a good one. Player intelligence versus character intelligence. Let me just take a drink of water here. This was posted by I Am Digital V3. Yes, you are. I hear a lot about how it's common in OSR games to rely more heavily on player intelligence and ingenuity to solve problems rather than the PC's ingenuity. For example, when thinking tactically about a potential encounter, OSR games seem to reward the player for coming up with a plan that would essentially avoid a die roll to see if the character would do well in that situation. How does this work with characters with low intelligence / wisdom, etc.? If I'm playing a character with low intelligence and wisdom, I can't, as the player, decide that they do something that they probably wouldn't be able to fathom with the stats I know they have. So my answer to that is, don't worry about it. I will tell you, as a GM, if you're playing a caveman with intelligence of 2 and you try to create the plans to a hydrogen bomb, I will either just say, can't do it, or more likely, I would try to break it down into its steps, and then I would start asking you, okay, well, let's roll and see if you can roll under your intelligence or within your intelligence to do that, or within your wisdom. And since your intelligence 2, chances of you even making one step down the large process towards inventing the hydrogen bomb would fail. You as a player don't have to worry about that. I think the other thing is that those stuff is already baked in. I like to think, instead of thinking of his intelligence, and this is my little, call it my little house rule, call it my little interpretation. I think of it more as your education or your memory, your knowledge. The only thing that it really affects in terms of mechanics is, at least in BX, I think in getting AD&D, it starts to affect how many spells you can have, but I don't think in BX and earlier it even affects spells. It just affects the languages, So I like to think of, if you're trying to remember stuff, if you are, how educated you may be, how much you may have learned and remembered. So you could have a backstory that you are someone who spent years and years in the highest universities in the land, but your intelligence is low, which means, to me, it's just that you have a terrible memory. You've forgotten a lot. You can come up with great things, but you're not going to tend to be able to put them in action because you're going to forget some detail. And wisdom, I think, plays into saving throws. I think maybe not even. Maybe I could look it up because I have my book right here. But in any case, right, I don't want the player, as a player, you don't need to worry about that. I will worry about if I feel like you're impinging on your character's low intelligence. But again, right, I don't think of intelligence as your smarts. I don't think if you have low intelligence, you have to act like a dullard. I don't think it's necessary. And if you want to, that's great. But I don't make it up, oh, you got an intelligence 7, you got to play as an idiot. That is up to you. Let's see. Does wisdom? Yeah, wisdom affects your saving throws, right? So wisdom affects your saving throws. Intelligence affects your languages. If your game is using roll under attribute, it's really up to your GM. Don't worry about it. Play your character the way you want to play them. Those attribute scores, whether low or high, will factor in more than enough. I would never tell someone, oh, you have this, like the same thing. Oh, your dex is 5. You got to walk with a limp, or you got to be, no, right? It's just when you got to do dex stuff, you'll get enough things that you'll fail that will put forth the characterization of you tripping over yourself or whatnot. So that's my take. All right, get an upvote. Oh, I will look at some of the responses here. So I don't think that my response, I don't think how I do it is the general way. Let's see. Megatopyrus says, I don't let the numbers become a straitjacket. If a player of a stupid character makes a smart choice or vice versa, I'm happy to remind myself that it's just a game and roll with it. I'm not interested in grading anyone on their method acting. Sure, you can have Theobald the Thick bumble right into a trap or ambush that you, his player, saw coming simply because he quote-unquote should, but I'm not going to insist on that or police it or anything. He's your guy, you do you. I agree with that. Besides, the concrete effects of intelligence are generally baked in the rules already, extra languages, magic use, etc. Yes. And then someone else said the player intelligence is the character's intelligence. That's right. Character's intelligence score is just their language learning capability and inherent magic useriness. Pretty much. That was from Ivan the Unpleasant, and before that, Megatopyrus. I will upvote them. So yeah, that's my take. Don't need to force it. I feel like this comes up more in 5th edition, but yeah. Do not force it. All right, 15 minutes left. How much more trouble can we get into? OSR piety systems, opinions on them, favorites. I haven't seen any piety systems, but I'm curious to know some. This was submitted by RF Cannon or RFK Annan. Hard to say, RF Cannon. All right, before I forget, take my upvote. I really like the idea of piety systems. I think they can add a lot to a game, especially an OSR style game. What do you think of piety systems in general? Have you run a game with them? What are your favorites? The Barbarians of Lemuria times D&D hack that the Barbarians of Lemuria author wrote has a beautifully simple piety system for the priest class at the back of the booklet. I didn't know that existed. All right, what is this? The BOL hack. I'll have to check that out. I'll add it to my wish list. Thank you. All right, so there's a Barbarians of Lemuria hack. I'm a big Barbarians of Lemuria guy, so I will have to check that out. I should probably do something on just that book in general. Oh, let's see. Checking the chat. Fluffy the Griffin. I've always looked at intelligence as education, not how brain dead you are. You can be a smart cookie, just don't have the knowledge. Yeah, exactly. Could be your education. And again, I like to leave it open in terms of how players want to set up their backstory for their characters. So if you have an intelligence of 6, but you have this idea of being from a university, you can, and we can think about the reasons why that doesn't translate into higher intelligence. Could be you got bonked on the head and your memory is just a bit oozy, or you just didn't attend a lot of the classes, or you're just someone that has just bad retention, right? There are lots of ways to slice it and dice it, but it's up to you as a player how you want to play it, and I will hop along. The mechanical stuff will take care of themselves, and as a player, I don't think you have to worry about it. Neoclassical Greek geek revival that I have heard of, as an aside, is supposed to have something, but it's not here. Mythic Odysseys of Theros has one. I haven't seen that. That's the 5th edition one. Lesser Key of the Celestial Legion. Is that something I can read for free? That's something on itch. And there's 100. Okay, so I was hoping people would put more examples in the chat instead of just linking. I'll take a look at this one if they have a preview or something. $9. The Lesser Key to the Celestial Legion. Have you ever wanted to add weird religious elements to your game? Have you ever wanted to add strange heralds of the gods who appear dramatically to guide and boss your PCs around? Have you ever wished for more gods and offered other books? Want to create your own? Add a little flourish? Okay, so this is compatible with DCC. Okay, they don't really say too much more about it. Could be interesting. Maybe I'll check it out another time. Well, I was hoping there'd be more actual things there, but there's not. It's okay. Okay, we've got Decolonizing your OSR game. This sounds like it's a good one. I'm just going to remember to upvote now. Oh, it's a blog entry. All right, this is posted on the Luminescent Lich, which we have linked to before. I will link it here in the chat, and hopefully everywhere you're seeing this, we will see it. Everywhere you're seeing it, you'll see it. Boy, that's some major English right there. So this was written on the 7th, so a couple days ago. So the issue of whether or not D&D is racist and or colonialist with overtones of 80s American capitalism seems to have reared its head again, as it seems to every couple of months. I'm not going to write about these views in particular. Other people have written about them in better ways than I could at length. I always find myself feeling like a middle child when this topic comes up, kind of stuck between my older sibling, hardcore TSR old school grognards, and my younger sibling, 5th edition fanboys, as they argue vehemently all over Twitter while I just kind of stand to the side, ignored by mom and dad. I do think there are some problematic themes in D&D, but I don't think the issue is as polarized as this topic is often treated and talked about. Whether you run your table with all the problematic content in its 80s glory, or you remove anything that could be seen as problematic to anyone and run a game that begins to not resemble D&D much anymore and is firmly family friendly. I don't think the issue is so stark, and there are multiple ways to decolonize your game and keep it interesting. In fact, some of these things, and I think the OSR sphere, have been doing for a while and have been doing so not for any particularly woke reasons, at least not initially, but because they lead to a much more interesting game. All right, so here we're going to get into some things. And by the way, I mean, yes, I do think that there are problematic themes in D&D and just in a lot of these fantasy games in general. I don't disagree with that. I did not catch whatever Twitter kerfuffle was happening. I'm on Twitter, but I feel like I'm fairly, I want to say protected, but insulated, I guess, from a lot of that stuff because I'm not on there constantly. And I feel like the folks who are in my sphere that I'm following and reading aren't getting into that stuff, so I tend not to see it, which I think is good for me. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter. Usually, I just kind of post updates and things, but I'll throw some things out there just conversationally as well. I'd like to get more conversational on Twitter. It's just sometimes the time gets away from me. Classic Rando says the comments for that were really bad. OSR attracts a lot of reactionaries, at least online. Have you read this article? I haven't gotten it. Yeah, that is a big issue. I kind of feel like I want to do a video just on this thing because I think the reactionary element in the OSR hurts it a lot. I think a lot more than those things folks may think, and keeps people away from it who would otherwise find things to enjoy. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why you have on the one hand folks who will talk about homebrewing and making it your own and doing all that stuff, but then at the same time getting angry at whatever Wizards of the Coast does or some other rights holder who wants to do things to make the game more diverse and more open. So it just seems a weird thing to have. I'm going to get super mad at Wizards of the Coast saying that orcs are no longer evil, but I'm also going to be talking about how great it is. I can homebrew whatever I want. Well, if I'm homebrewing whatever I want, then what do I care what Wizards is doing? Because I can still do whatever I want. It's a weird space. But yes, the reaction element in OSR, I do think is holding the OSR part of the hobby back. We can only do what we can do. Okay, use the early modern period as inspiration instead of the medieval period or Tolkien-esque fantasy. I know this is kind of a general point, but I find it a very useful one in terms of the general level of technology and political/cultural organization that goes on in most D&D settings and games. It more closely resembles the early modern period, approximately 1400 to 1800. It's kind of the sweet spot. You have individualism becoming a thing, the printing press and rising literacy, the beginnings of capitalism, the beginnings of scientific investigation, and the rise of the nation state. Anything earlier, and it's really hard to understand the thinking and perspective of the people who lived back then. Anything later, and technological development begins to change things so much it wouldn't really be D&D. Well, maybe, but I mean, a lot of people do steampunk and D&D, and I don't find this idea that if you move I feel like D&D can be anything. I don't think there's some limit to once you break out into, say, steampunk or something else, that suddenly it's not D&D. D&D can be whatever you want it to be. It may seem weird to suggest this time period you decolonize your game, as it's kind of when colonization was happening and the slave trade was in full swing. But I find reading up on actual history of this era really forces you to discard general romanticized ideas of both the oppressor and oppressed that are often formed after colonization happens. It also gives you an idea of how and why colonization happened and who benefited. It also gives you insight into what these colonized societies were actually like before they were colonized. If you're going to play games set in the past with multiple cultures, being knowledgeable on how colonialism happens and what leads to colonialism can help you portray the setting in a way that's sensitive, multifaceted. Yeah, that stuff's true. I mean, that's interesting to put it in that time range. I'm just going to skip down a little bit. Get rid of evil humanoid races and just have humans. One common criticism of how D&D may be racist is its depiction of evil humanoid races as inherently evil, who, depending on what edition you're looking at, may resemble people of color. It's part of the whole civilization versus wilderness theme in D&D, where the civilized cultures are generally more modeled after European ones, and the wilderness cultures are modeled after indigenous or nomadic cultures. A great solution I find is just to replace them all with humans. Yes. Oh, just kidding. The chat. Classic Rando. I think I want to say Rondo, like Rajon Rondo, the basketball player. Would love to see an in-depth video on that topic. That's a great point about the creativity of homebrewing and making things your own versus the anger at discussions regarding diversity, inclusion, etc. Yeah, it's. I feel like some people just get angry at the fact that people want to be inclusive, and I don't know where the anger comes from. They feel like they're being left behind, or they feel like something's being lost. I don't get it when, particularly with the OSR, the whole point of it is you can do whatever you want in your game. But yeah, it is interesting. There's probably some fascinating stuff that I'm not in a position to really examine, like the actual core of where the stuff's coming from, like so many stuff that's happening in society at large. Right, there's probably deeper things there. As far as this, getting rid of evil humanoid races and humanoid races just have humans, I would say just get rid of the evil part. Humanoids don't have to be all evil. Humans obviously are not all good. You can have the whole civilization versus wilderness. I think the other thing is you can theme your wilderness differently. And something that I've been getting into in my current home game is, and I don't know if this is perfect because it's been a long time since I read a lot of the Arthurian books, but I've taken this sort of approach looking at kind of Arthurian England as the sort of the setting in my brain. And in that kind of setting, there is no real frontier. And I'm not playing with, okay, there's the Picts or the Scots that are behind a certain border. The Hadrian's Wall kind of aspect, that part of the wilderness frontier, isn't there. But what you have is you have civilization or culture or whatever, societies that are together, I don't know, organized societies. And then you have wild places. And there can be all kinds of stuff in those wild places. And those wild places are not necessarily wild in the sense that they are savage. They're just they just stand apart from the places that have become organized in terms of shires and dukedoms and counties and those sorts of things. And the other thing I've done is, in that kind of Arthurian sense, is a lot of the fantasy creatures come from a separate plane. So they're not their home is not the Arthurian plane or the primaterial plane where my Arthurian thing is. They're kind of encouraged, and in a sense, they are sort of colonizing or attempting to colonize the primaterial plane. And so and a lot of times where those portals are, where those entries, where they're accessing from is in those wild places. So, the fae, the, elf kind of creatures, those portals tend to materialize in those wild, untamed woods. So that's where they come out. and that's those links between wild places and fantasy creatures. It doesn't have anything to do with sort of we are trying to tear down something or other. It's more this interplay of these different cultures who are next to each other. One is a culture of chaos in the sense that it's not formed. It's just nature, maybe even nature to a heightened level, and then organized cultures. That's probably not perfect. I'm sure some folks could pick it apart for, oh no, I'm still dealing with colonial vibes. It might be, not intentionally. But I think there are ways you can have a lot of this stuff and getting rid of this idea that we are taming some kind of wilderness. I'm losing my voice. Taming, colonizing. We can get rid of the aspect that we're colonizing it. My players, there's at no point are they trying to take over the wilderness, right? The wilderness is there, and oftentimes it's protected, and it is an element of the landscape. These woods, these things that have been there since time immemorial, they're important to the place. But they are also where a lot of the fantastic stuff is set or comes from. Fluffy the Griffin says, a lot of old mindsets that are afraid of things changing. They're afraid they won't be able to run the game they like, which is silly. Yeah. But they seem to also be afraid that other people will be able to run the games that they like, because it ends up being this whole gatekeeping thing, right? It's like, I don't think that they're afraid that they're not going to be able to run their games, but they some have some fear that other people are going to be running their games. Let's see. Here we have number 3, have starting cultural backgrounds instead of races and ethnicities. Yep. It's probably good. A lot of games will let you play as other races with racial traits or abilities. Some games, which tend to use humans more, will let you pick a starting ethnicity. I tend to let players just roll a local starting culture for their character instead. Yeah, I agree with that. And examples, agricultural, nomadic, itinerant, religious, urban, seafaring, nobility, freetown, impoverished, servants, mountain folk, pastoral, militaristic. Those are all good. I'm not going to go over those in detail, but yeah. I think if you look at all these different creatures, the ones that have societies, as being intelligent and having their own cultures and their own reasons for doing things, and we're not positing they're evil, then a lot of this stuff will go away, I think, as just nature of that, right? If goblins aren't all evil and they have a culture, and I've thought about the culture, and they have reasons for doing things that are good for them, not just they're doing evil for evil's sake, then if you have a goblin colony or a goblin settlement that's on the edges of a human settlement and those two interact, suddenly those interactions become a lot more complicated. Or if the party's interacting with them, suddenly they don't become black and white issues. They have more shades to them because the goblins aren't just going to be attacking just to attack. And the party probably, once they realize that they have other ways to interact with these goblins besides just killing them and everything they have, will come up with different things. So I think just making that change, giving things cultures, giving things aims beyond whatever you think an alignment would be, making them no alignment at all. Now, a culture can have an alignment. You might think about the drow who worship Lolth can be evil, but they're not born that way. You can have drow that end up in another society or that break away from that drow that can be good, right? You could think about how particular culture. So one group of goblins are pastoral and they're good. Another group can be maybe nomadic and more militaristic, and they veer towards evil. But they're all goblins, and they have the same way you would have different human cultures who act differently. I feel like that's kind of the main thing. Give things cultures, give them aims. Don't even worry about what creature type it is. Just think of them in terms of what you would want if you were them. What is their situation in the world, and what are they trying to accomplish? And then go from there. Have your world be post-apocalyptic. I don't know. What does he say? In most OSR games, the players are delving into ruins and looting treasure. At heart, this is somewhat problematic, as that treasure probably belonged to someone. While this is a core part of OSR games, I think you can make your games a lot less problematic if you make the culture of the treasure comes from long dead. I mean, isn't that often long dead? I feel like almost all OSR games are by their nature post-apocalyptic. There was an ancient empire that collapsed, and now you're delving into their ruins. So I'm not sure what that one is. But if you're not, yes, if your game is party going through and raiding other people's homes, sure. But I think for the most part, when you're going to ruins and dungeons, the people who are in there are not the original occupants. They're people who are coming in like you to try to take whatever resources they can. And then let's see, have no land be truly uninhabited. Humanity is pretty much spread all over the globe and lived in just about every type of geography you could find. I'm not talking about modern times, I'm talking about pretty much the last couple thousand years. While population density may vary, there are a few parts of the earth that have ever truly been unclaimed. It's true. Yeah, and I think that's, at least for me, a lot of those wilderness places are ones that are not claimed by the main cultures, but they're claimed potentially by other cultures. And and a lot of times for various reasons, we leave those places untouched. Fluffy the Griffin says, I don't think I've ever run a game where the tombs or ruins are still occupied by original owners. Yeah, I mean, it's always somebody else has come in after the fact. Or at least that's how I've always been. Though I'm sure there's some gray areas in which you have like cultures that have been built on ruins, right? So if you go in and you're raiding, say in Caverns of Thracia, yes, the original folks who build the temples at the bottom are not whatever the lizard men or whoever they are down there, but you may be raiding lizard men stuff. I mean, there's still going to be some crossover, but for the most part, I feel like, yeah, it's you versus other interlopers. Let's see, and then keep the weird things relatively uncommon and very weird. I personally hate the overall trend that seems to be present in most WotC materials to normalize the fantastic real elements in fantasy in order to present a setting that seems well thought out, where fantastic things are part of daily life. This is both present in low magic stuff like Forgotten Realms and high magic stuff like Eberron. I agree. I like weird things to be weird, but also not common. No Fun Allowed said the only original owners that would still be in the ruins would be undead. Yeah. Yep, that's true. All right, so that's that article, and I think I'm going to call it quits here. Hey, as usual, if you like this stuff, give it the thumbs up or whatever, heart, because I have this streaming in a couple locations. So whatever ability, wherever you're listening to this, has a chance to like it, please like it if you enjoyed it. Subscribe in whichever way you can or want to. I appreciate that a lot. If you're watching this live, like a handful of folks are, have a great weekend. I have to post up a podcast version of something. It won't be this. This probably won't go up until podcast form for next week. So if you enjoy listening to these later, that will be up sometime then. Peace out, everybody. Have a great weekend. Game on. I will talk to you later.